Welcome back inside the den. We're excited to have you for another episode. Today, we're talking Matt Norlander, his rankings of the Nevada basketball team. Stirred some controversy out there in the Twitter sphere, or the X sphere, whatever you want to call it these days. What's your main takeaway from that?
My main takeaway is I'm just very happy that Nevada men's basketball is a matted media member who's not Chris Murray. So I've obviously been at the center of some rankings or predictions that people don't agree with. So I get it from Matt's perspective. He does have, 6 Mountain West teams in his top 101. So to say that Nevada's going to finish 7th in the Mountain West or worse, I think that's a pretty big leap. I don't agree with that. I obviously have Nevada at number 4 in my preseason rankings in the Mountain West. And you look at the Ken Palm preseason rankings, Nevada easily within the top 101. So it is a little bit controversial. I know we saw Jared Lucas say we'll check back on this in March and see where we end up. So, if it motivates the Wolfpack just a little bit more through the long season to prove that they are one of the better teams at the Division I level, so be it. I mean, I would be more surprised if Nevada finishes outside the top 101 than if they win an NCAA tournament game. So I think they're clearly within that top 101, but we all have our own rankings, and they're never accurate, and sometimes a ranking might look outlandish at the start of the season, and it turns out to be accurate at the end.
Yeah, now, if you've been living under a rock, Matt Norlander, certified college basketball expert, ranked Nevada outside of the top 101 in his preseason rankings. And like Chris mentioned, there was several other Mountain West schools on that list, and it seems like it's consensus in the preseason voting that Nevada would finish 4th.
Mm-hmm.
So to exclude that, you can't fault the guy, but he's a national reporter. Like, how is he supposed to know the ins and outs of this program? But on the surface, why do you think he slided the Nevada?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a national reporter, you obviously don't know all of the intricacies of a roster and how they're trying to build it. There's more than 360 Division I programs, so it's hard to know that about all the programs. So if you're kind of an outside observer, you look at Nevada's offseason. They lost Darian Williams, the Mountain West Freshman of the Year, to Texas Tech. They lost Will Baker, their number 3 scorer and starting center, to LSU. So you have 2 defections to power conference schools. And who did you bring in? If you look again on paper, you bring in Tylen Pope from Tulane. He was a part-time starter with the Green Wave. You bring in Jariah Coleman, a junior college player who did play 2 Division I seasons at St. Francis and got almost no playing time. And then you bring in 3 freshmen, 2 of them pretty highly touted, and Tyler Rollison and Jazz Gardner. But I could see if you're a national reporter, you're saying, okay, the players who left were better than the players who came in. I think if you're more in the local media, or certainly if you're in the Wolfpack coaching offices and you're trying to construct this team, they're probably looking at it and saying, well, we have KJ Himes, who didn't play really at all last year. He's going to be the starting center. He could be an upgrade on Will Baker, certainly defensively. You have Hunter McIntosh, who scored in double figures 3 years at Elon, barely played last year because of a knee injury. He's added to the roster. You have Jariah Coleman and Tylen Pope very specifically to improve one of your biggest weaknesses last year, which is that front court defense, that toughness, that rebounding. And then you have Tyler Rollison and Jazz Gardner, 2 top 175 freshmen that you're trying to have add to your depth, which was a big concern last year. So you're saying we got 2 all-conference guards coming back, Jared Lucas, Keenan Blackshear, got a 4th-year starter in Trey Coleman coming back. You've got some pretty good experience in the front court, and you're much deeper than you were a year ago when you were probably, in the 50 to 60 range nationally in terms of rankings. So that's my perspective. Is I still think Nevada's a top 75 team, if not top 50 team entering the season. But there are certainly question marks as well. Who's going to be their number 3 scorer? Where are they going to get their front court scoring? Is the shooting ability overall on this team outside of Jared Lucas up to par? Can they make those defensive gains to really compete for a Mountain West championship? They were better defensively last year, but not great. So they're, like with every team, there are going to be questions entering the season.
Certainly. And, a lot to replace, obviously. Will Baker's offense, Darian Williams, a well-rounded player. But I think, the return of KJ Himes kind of fills in where Will Baker, was, if you're looking at a deficit in his game, it was, paint defense and just overall physicality. So I think, the addition of Tylen Pope, KJ Himes getting healthy, you bring in, Jariah Coleman, who's, we haven't seen what he looks like on the court, but all signs point to, a good rim protector. So that's kind of like the philosophy of Alford and what they're going with, going forward into the season is, hey, we're more physical, we have more depth, and we have some young, exciting freshmen that are coming in that could potentially have an impact. But yeah, I mean, you can't fall to the Norlander, but if you're saying top 75, top 50, then they're an NCAA tournament team again. So with that being said, what are the expectations for this season with this roster?
Yeah, I think the expectations are NCAA tournament. I think before that, I think the expectation is that their last couple games of the regular season are truly meaningful because they're competing for a Mountain West championship. I think everything has been building toward year 5 under Steve Alford. He obviously took over a program that had won the Mountain West championship 3 straight years. They'd been to the NCAA tournament 3 straight years. They'd been to the Sweet 16. They'd been a top 10 team in the nation. And certainly there was a little bit of a rebuild early on because you lose the Martin twins, you lose Jordan Caroline, COVID hits you. Maybe you don't grab the right transfers out of the portal in terms of personality fit, in terms of trying to build your culture. So they kind of bottomed out in the third year. Year 4, they're the big surprise making NCAA tournament. I think year 5, the expectations are sky high. If they're not competing for a Mountain West championship and in an NCAA tournament, I don't think anybody within Nevada men's basketball is going to be happy with that end result. Because you look at this team, the one big thing Steve Alford's talked a lot about during his tenure is they don't have experience. And you look at this year's roster, Jared Lucas and Keenan Blackshear, your starting guards, both fifth-year seniors. Trey Coleman, your starting wing, at the small forward position. He's a fourth-year starter, fourth-year senior. KJ Himes at center, he's supposed to start there, a sixth-year senior. And if you start Tylen Pope, you're talking about a fifth-year senior at power forward. All 5 of your starters could be seniors, with 3 of them being in their 5th or 6th year of college. This is a very old team, a very experienced team. And last year they went through the battles of trying to compete for a Mountain West championship. Ended up falling a few games short. Didn't end the season exactly how they wanted to, but I think fair expectations of this team, a minimum of 20 wins, especially with that non-conference schedule being a little bit on the lighter side in terms of what it looks like on paper, a minimum of top 3 or 4 in the Mountain West, but truly competing for a Mountain West championship in the last week of the regular season, and a minimum of playing in the NCAA tournament for the second straight season.
We'll see. You mentioned this in the past. Years when they're expected to be, good under Alford, they underperform. Years when they're expected to be, somewhat average or below par, they end up exceeding expectations. So we'll see again this year. Again, the roof is raised from last year, but maybe their loss to Arizona State can be, serve as a chip on their shoulder and kind of build forward. And speaking of chips on shoulders, Jared Lucas, he's getting a little saucy out there with the tweet. But looking at the preseason all Mountain West team, you see the omission of Keenan Blackshear and Jared Lucas. Was that warranted, or I know one media member in Reno voted for them to be on the first team. But what's your takeaway from?
Yeah, so I didn't get a vote in the Mountain West preseason ballot this year. I've always voted in the past, but I think there were some issues with my postseason ballot last year, not having Jared Lucas as my Mountain West newcomer of the year. I had EJ Harkless from UNLV, who basically led in all of the stats in the respective categories. Obviously wasn't on quite as strong of a team. Both were very good players. I still had Jared Lucas, second team, all Mountain West. And you look coming into this year, I did put out a hypothetical ballot, and I did have Jared Lucas on my first team. I think he's one of the best 5 players in this league. I had Keenan Blackshear as my top player on the second team. So I think Nevada has 2 very good players. But you look at the top of the Mountain West in terms of their player of the year candidates, there's some really good players in this league. You have Tyson Degenhart. He was my preseason player of the year from Boise State. You have Isaiah Stevens, All-American candidate, point guard at Colorado State. He was the overall consensus preseason player of the year. You have Jalen House and Jamal Mashburn Jr. at New Mexico. And then you've got to put somebody from San Diego State on that list because they were so good last year. So Lamont Butler is the one who ended up getting that nod. So, those were the top 5. I think Jared and Keenan maybe split the vote in terms of people looking at who do I put on Nevada from my first team. But whether on the first team or not, those are 2 very good players. Those are the foundation of this team. And at the end of the year, barring injury, both those guys will get postseason all-conference accolades. Will it be first team? Will it be second team? We'll see how it plays out.
Now, taking a step back here, we're talking Mountain West basketball. The old cliche is, good conference, but never does anything in the tournament. Does last year's San Diego State run give, good PR for the conference, and does it yield goodwill towards, potential bubble teams that are, on the bubble of making the tournament?
I mean, Nevada or the Mountain West in general has gotten, generous bids, I would say, just in terms of how many teams they've got in the last couple of years. I think San Diego State making that run, it is super validating for the Mountain West to be able to say we have a team that not only got past the Sweet 16 for the first time, it made a Final Four, it made a championship game. Like, you can have elite level teams coming out of the Mountain West. Me, from the media's perspective, like, that's the Mountain West perspective. Like, yeah, we deserve to be a national conference. We got teams that can make runs. Me, from the media perspective, will point out that only 2 teams in the Mountain West have even won an NCAA tournament game since 2014. That was Eric Musselman's Nevada teams, and then San Diego State, which did it under Steve Fisher and has done it under Brian Dutcher. So I still think there are a lot of questions about just how good this conference is, because you even look last year, almost all of the meat on Nevada's bone in terms of its NCAA tournament resume, quad 1 and quad 2 wins, were against Mountain West competition. Outside of conference, they didn't have a lot of quality wins, so they got that final spot in the NCAA tournament based on what they did in conference, not out of conference. And then we saw what happened in the first game, blown out by Arizona State by 25 points. I think that added a lot of credence to people who said Nevada didn't quite do enough in non-conference to come out here and earn this berth, because they go to Arizona State and Dayton and they don't look like they belong on the court. So in terms of motivating factors, yeah, Nevada going 0-4 in its last 4 games, losing at Wyoming, last place team in the Mountain West, and then losing at home against UNLV, so you don't go undefeated in your home games, and then losing to San Jose State in the Mountain West tournament, the Spartans' first ever win in that conference tournament, and then getting blown out in the Arizona State. I think that adds a lot of motivation beyond any rankings or anything like that to come back and say, we were a little lack of depth last year. We kind of ran out of gas, but we're going to be back better, stronger, and we're actually going to make some noise in the postseason this year. I think that had to be a motivating factor in the offseason. That was a really big step forward for the Wolfpack last year, but now can they do some damage in the postseason? Because you've seen quite a few early exits under Steve Alford at the Mountain West tournament for Nevada, and he did a really good job at New Mexico of competing at a high level in the conference tournament and winning conference championships. So he can obviously do it, but I think there has to be, you got to win some games in March. I think that's the big thing for this program this year.
Certainly. Now, like, looking at like a projection for Nevada, what will it take for them to potentially replicate what San Diego State did last year? Obviously, that's a miracle run that comes once every 100 years. But what do they have to start to build outside of having a ginormous NIL pot for just to get any player that they want? I know it kind of starts with facilities, but recruiting. What if you had to break it down to 3 elements that they could
long-term program building, or this year with the talent that they have?
You could do short-term and long-term.
Yeah, I mean, short-term they got to be better defensively. If you want to win the Mountain West, you got to be a top 50 Ken Palm defensive team. History bears that out. That's why San Diego State is always at the top of the Mountain West. That's why Boise State has gotten to that point. Leon Rice, early in his career, seemed more like an offensive coach than a defensive coach. But the last half decade, they've really locked in defensively. They've been excellent there, and that's why they've won Mountain West championships. You look at Eric Musselman's teams at Nevada, a lot of the acclaim went to the offense. That Sweet 16 team was pretty lopsided on the offense, but his other teams, very, very good defensively. So Nevada did make a big step forward last year defensively, but still not top 50 in terms of Ken Palm. If they hit that top 50, then they probably are going to win a Mountain West championship. They probably are going to be very competitive in an NCAA tournament game. And that's why they have brought in these pieces that we talked about, Tylen Pope, KJ Himes coming back, Jariah Coleman. All these guys lead with their defense. And you have Trey Coleman and Keenan Blackshear, who both made the all-defensive team last year in the Mountain West on the wings. So if you can improve that defensive front court, then you have all the pieces necessary to go out there and play high enough level defense to win good games against big teams in crucial moments. So I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, that definitely adds up, and they kind of signaled that with their movement towards bringing in players like Pope, getting Himes back, and Jariah Coleman and Jazz Gardner. So physicality will be a big element in this year's Nevada basketball team. We sit here, 5-6 days out from an exhibition game. We heard rumors about the Oregon game last weekend. If that's true, how big is that? Do you put much stock into an exhibition game, or is it a signal they're heading in the right direction for the season?
Yeah, Oregon's a top 50 Ken Palm team. They were picked to finish 4th in the Pac-12 preseason poll, so that's a good team. That's a talented roster. They brought back 5 of their 10 top scorers last year, but their all-conference center reportedly did not play in that game, so obviously that's a big loss. So, yeah, they reportedly won by 9 points or so. They played 5 10-minute quarters. It was a little bit lower scoring, but given that Nevada went to Oregon last year and that wasn't a very competitive game, I think that's a good show of progress. Unless you're actually there watching it, you don't know exactly, are they playing like normal rotations? Are they just playing young guys? Like, how serious are they taking the winning element of it versus the developmental element of it? And while it was open, we didn't go out there to Eugene, so we don't know all of that stuff. But, when Nevada made the Sweet 16 in 2004, they lost an exhibition game. When they were 24-1 in 2019 to start the season, they lost to Washington in an exhibition. So I wouldn't put a ton of stock in it, but it's good to go on the road and play a Pac-12 opponent and kind of see how you stack up.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see. I mean, the upcoming Washington game, we have some non-conference games that will be interesting. One of which is another tournament, the Diamond Head Classic. What do you think their best outcome is at the Diamond Head Classic? Will they get some maybe quality quad 2, quad win matchups there that they could build their resume with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big opportunity. So they could match up in the second round against TCU. That's a preseason top 25 team. You look at Nevada's non-conference schedule. There's not a lot of like obvious quad 1 or quad 2 games. They go to Washington. That could be a quad 2 game. They play Drake in a neutral site in Las Vegas. That could be a quad 2 game. It's kind of hard to project out how good everyone's going to be. So there might be a game that pops up into that quad 2 area. But in terms of, those quality non-conference marquee wins you have to get to be able to prove that you deserve to be in the NCAA tournament, I think the Diamond Head will be very big for Nevada, especially if they face off against TCU. That's a team that made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament last year. And like we said, really high expectations for that team. So that'd be a great opportunity. Just like last year, they played at the Cayman Islands Classic against Kansas State, which eventually made it to an Elite Eight. And that was, a loss in overtime Nevada should have won, but they at least showed that they could beat really high-level teams.
Welcome back, guys. We're talking about Nevada basketball here. Quick question. What's the magic number this year in terms of wins for them to make the NCAA tournament?
I mean, it depends how good the Mountain West is. Last year, the Mountain West was very good in terms of RPI and net. If you're a top 5 conference in the nation, then 22 wins, which they got the last year, is sufficient. I don't know that you can fully bank on that. Obviously, we started with Matt Norlander's list. I have 6 in the top 101 that doesn't include Nevada. That would indicate that that's a very strong conference. So maybe you can get in the lower 20s. Typically, if you're looking for an at-large berth out of like a Mountain West, you probably want to hit like 24, 25. And I would point out Nevada does have 2 extra non-conference games since they're playing in an MTE event, and at Hawaii they're playing 14 non-conference instead of 12. So they'll end up playing 32 games plus the Mountain West tournament, so a minimum of 33. So let's say 24 wins required. If they go 24-8, maybe additional games played if they make a run at the Mountain West tournament. I think 24 games in the win column gets them into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see where they end up getting fielded. Obviously, the round of 68, first 4, it's probably not ideal. I mean, you take it, but
yeah.
I remember watching it last year being like, this doesn't feel like the
not
NCAA
quite
tournament.
the same.
No, it didn't. Obviously, the blowout loss to Arizona State didn't add to that feeling, but there's something. There's a magic to playing on those the field of 64 days when everything's going on. That's when the real madness happens. I feel like the first 4 it just feels very diluted.
The stats count. It counts as an NCAA tournament unit for the conference, but I would agree. Unless you're in the 64 and you get that full experience, it probably leaves a little left to be desired.
Much to be desired, for sure. We had much talk about Norlander, but we can talk about Ken Pom. Where do you see them finishing at the end of the year?
Yeah, so let's go both give a number. Where do we think Nevada's going to finish in the final Ken Pom rankings? And we'll check back in March and see if we were closer than Matt Norlander was. So I think it's going to be a good team. I think you got the coaching, you've got the experience, you've got the experienced backcourt in particular, and then you've got the defense. And you got some depth pieces. I wouldn't say it's like the deepest team in the world, but for the Mountain West, if you go 8 deep, that's pretty good. There are not a lot of Mountain West teams who their 8th player is productive and a good player. So I'm going to say 42. I'll go Jackie Robinson's number. I think Nevada will be the number 42 team in Ken Pom's final rankings, which would put them in the NCAA tournament.
My number that popped up was 45.
You can take it.
I just didn't want to, prices right you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, come on, get a mind of your own, Jared. But I'd probably say, 47. is a good number to put. It's just like they'll be fringe top 25 at times this year, and then they'll suffer like a bad loss here or there, and then it'll drop them a little bit, but they'll like salvage it with like good wins over San Diego State or like New Mexico, on the road or something. That's how you kind of like stay relevant there. So yeah, it should be an interesting season. Who knows? They could prove us wrong, be that like at the end of the top 25, and that'd be a good outcome. Kind of just projecting though, like a stellar season like this, what can it lead to? In terms of a macro level, right? Because we have Nevada has a new proposed stadium getting built in 26, right? 2026.
Yeah, if everything goes well, 2026,
Right.
27.
Right, but if Alford really cements himself as a solid coach, he's going to be here for a while. He signed his 10-year contract, of course. But what could it look like in years if you have successive NCAA tournament runs leading into that new facility? Could it lead to like a potentially a new Gonzaga out west?
That's always been kind of the goal if you're any mid-major team, is to be able to bump up to Gonzaga. So what does that take? That takes resources, that takes facilities, that takes history of winning, that takes putting guys in the NBA. So if this arena does happen and they have the players' room and players' lounge and locker room, that's going to be done in about a year from now. They have the practice facility that Ramon Sessions donated $1 million to. You've got the facilities to be a routine top 40 team in the country. They've invested in terms of the coaching. They gave Steve Alford basically a $12 million 10-year contract, so they've invested there. They have that history of winning right now over multiple coaches. I mean, this is a team that's won, I think, 12 conference championships since 2000. They've been to the NCAA tournament 8 separate times. They've made 2 Sweet 16s. And then you look at putting guys in the pros. They've almost sent a dozen guys to the pros in the last 20 years. They've got 3 guys on current NBA rosters, and the Martin twins and JaVale McGee. So if they can get to the NCAA tournament and win games under Steve Alford, like they did under Eric Musselman, like they did under Mark Fox, like they did under Trent Johnson, and now capitalize with the facility improvements, then there's really no reason they can't be a regular year in and year out NCAA tournament team, top 40 in the country, top 25 if everything breaks right. So I think they're headed in the right direction, and I think if they're able to make a run this year, that will just further push that narrative to recruits that all of your dreams you can accomplish here. You can play in the NBA, you can win championships, you can play in the NCAA tournament. That's what all these kids want to do, and I think Nevada's putting itself in a position where it can show any recruit in the country you can do that here with the Wolfpack.
Yeah, exciting prospect. Just thinking about that new arena and what talent pool it can lead to. Alfred did say it's like, we'll get access to players' living rooms that we normally wouldn't get access to. I mean, they still have good players, but he probably is talking about potential 5-star recruits, right? If you're already getting like the talent pool that you're getting, you're talking about access to top 150 recruits that normally wouldn't take visits to Nevada. Potentially something big for the program coming up in the next, 5-10 years. But it all starts obviously with the next season. So we are, less than 2 weeks out until their opening game, and it'll be an exciting season. So
yeah, I think coming off the Wolfpack football season, obviously they just got a win as we record this, but it hasn't been the most happy memories. They've not maybe delivered to the level that fans are hoping for. So I think there should be a lot of expectations, and there should be a lot of exciting moments throughout the basketball season.
Certainly. Thanks as always for jumping on this with me. We'll have special guests coming up, hopefully next week. Stay tuned for that. Any final thoughts to the audience?
Just sorry about my throat. I've been sick for about 2 weeks, so sorry if I'm coughing into the microphone, but still got some scratchiness in there. Non-COVID, though. Non-COVID illness.
Non-COVID.
So hopefully the voice is a little bit better next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back for another episode. And remember to like, rate, subscribe, wherever you guys get this podcast at, and we'll see you next time.